EA execs thought BioWare fans would eat whatever slop they were given since, quote, the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG. Gamers have known for quite a long time that developers don't care about us, and the only thing they're interested in is expanding their profit margins. And the worst part about this isn't even the snobbish elitism, but rather the unbridled entitlement. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hardlight Network. Alrighty guys, in our last video we covered how developers are either unwilling or incapable of accepting responsibility for their failed projects, laying the blame at the feet of gamers, or as David Gaider puts it, the anti-fans. However, in today's video we're going to be discussing their actual look on the fanbase, and trust me, it's not as flattering as you might think. In previous videos on this channel we've discussed how major developers obviously have a low view of their fan base, and today's article proves that without a doubt. But before we get into today's video guys, do me a solid and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future, and also take to the comment section down below to let the developers know how you feel about them. And if you want to support this channel further, there are super thanks and memberships options down below. While these contributions are not required, they are greatly appreciated, so be sure to join today for access to exclusive perks and content that you can't get anywhere else. But without any further ado, let's get into today's article. And today's reading comes to us yet again from PC Gamer and is entitled, Dragon Age creator says EA execs thought BioWare fans would eat whatever slop they were given since, quote, the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG. Because it's an RPG. Peter Mandelson, the oleaginous right hand of Tony Blair's Labour Party in the late 90s, once remarked to a colleague that the party had no need to focus on its traditional voter base, and could safely dedicate itself to chasing more affluent, middle-class conservative voters. After all, said Mandelson, its base had, quote, nowhere else to go. Don't worry, I promise we'll get to Dragon Age. 14 years of Conservative Party rule later, and you might think that kind of reasoning has proven bankrupt. But only if you underestimate the powerful minds of the world's executive corporate class. It's not quite as consequential as the direction of British politics, but it turns out that EA had its own version of that thought process when it came to running BioWare in the 2010s. A notion that RPG fans would gobble up whatever you chucked their way, so long as you could plausibly call it an RPG. Instead, they thought, BioWare should focus on making games that appeal to people who don't usually play RPGs. So says David Gaider, creator of the Dragon Age setting and BioWare veteran, in a recent chat with Games Radar. Per Gaider, EA bosses used to refer to RPG stalwarts as, quote, living in the cave. That'd be the nerd cave, you see, where the nerds lived. You made an RPG and the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG, because it was an RPG. With EA bosses convinced that the nerd cave would spill out its denizens to any game with BioWare on the box, their philosophy became, quote, you didn't have to try to appeal to them, you had to worry about the people who weren't in the cave, which was the audience we actually wanted, which was much larger, which is how you ended up with the decidedly more actiony and slick cinematic focus of games like Mass Effect 2, 3, and Andromeda, as well as Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, and hey, probably the Veilguard 2. Gone were the crunchy stats and behind-the-scenes dice rolls from BioWare of yore. This was the era of spectacle, and to be fair to the execs for just a second, some of those games were bangers. BioWare did thread the needle on at least a few of them, but Gaider wasn't thrilled as things were increasingly pushed in that direction and away from BioWare's roots. Quote, I was always trying to push it to our traditional mechanics, he says, and that wasn't very welcome in the EA sphere. Gaider left BioWare in 2016, first heading to Beamdog, of Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition fame, and then to his own studio at Summerfall, currently working on a, quote, unholy roguelike deck builder. That meant he dodged the release of what might have been the ultimate expression of EA's action-obsessive executive philosophy, Anthem, which was not a good game. Not even the Nerd Cave turned out for that one. You know, given the constant pandering and excuses that often comes from these industry insiders, it's refreshing to get an actual take for once. But to tell you the truth, we're not so stupid that we actually needed David Gator to spell it out for us. Gamers have known for quite a long time that developers don't care about us, and the only thing they're interested in is expanding their profit margins. Long gone are the days of actually producing artistically meaningful projects, because now we are in the era of profitability. Developers have been dumbing down and simplifying the gameplay and storylines of their projects for a very long time. And gamers have always known that the intentions of these changes have been to capture a wider audience. And the worst part about this isn't even the snobbish elitism, but rather the unbridled entitlement. These companies genuinely think that because they have a few good games under their belt, that they can rest on their laurels and shovel out whatever slop they want to make a profit. They're so used to winning, they've forgotten what it's like to lose, and when fans are dissatisfied with the final product, they freak out and don't know how to handle it. In their mind, the only explanation they can come up with for any negative feedback is that the fan base has simply gone insane and is making every attempt to actively undermine their hard work. We touched on this topic a little bit in my last video, but I think it's time we hone in on the other side of this problem, that being the culture war. In our last video, we highlighted Dragon Age: The Veilguard as an example of how progressive ideologies are being pushed in video games. And while that game was much more overt than some of the other examples we can point to, with an entire companion questline centered around gender identity, and also the ability for the player character to pursue a transgender questline, there are other titles which are implementing a much more subtle approach with the backing of publishers and third-party companies alike. An example of such subtle changes would be in the Oblivion remaster, where the gendered character creator options were changed from male and female to body type A and body type B. This small but significant change actually altered the way that the game was played, because in the original, there were actually stat differences between the gender options. In the original release of Oblivion, female characters actually had a higher dexterity and mana, whereas male characters had a higher strength and endurance. This decision reduces the choice of your in-game character's gender to a minor aesthetic choice and eliminates any effect it would have had on gameplay. Not only that, but all of the in-game armor models use the male preset, which only further erases the femininity of female characters in-game. And in case you're skeptical that these changes were politically motivated, Nexus Mods unilaterally banned any modder who brought back the gendered options. This video is not meant to critique the politics of any individual viewer, but rather demonstrate the mindset and entitlement of these developers. You will buy what they want you to buy, you will think what they want you to think, and any complaints to the contrary will either fall on deaf ears or be written off entirely as toxic. But that's going to do it for this video today, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who has watched up to this point. If you can, do me a solid and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future, and also leave a comment with your thoughts down below. As more and more franchises become the pet projects of bad actors within the industry, we will only see more bad news like this in the future. After all, for the type of people that we're dealing with, it's much easier for them to simply hijack a beloved franchise and run it into the ground than it is for them to actually create something on their own that's worth playing. These people are uncreative, unimaginative, and uninspired, and as long as they are producing the games that we are playing, slop will always be on the menu. But thankfully, I've still got tons of fun and exciting games in my backlog to keep me busy for the next decade. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.